The Sea Peoples were a powerful ancient civilization in the Mediterranean that caused the ancients to tremble, but historians have no clue who they were. Most people can name the prominent ancient Mediterranean civilizations like Rome and Greece. Although these cultures greatly impacted our lives and changed our worldview, they were not the only civilizations to spring up around the Mediterranean. There were others, and some were even older than the Greeks and Romans, influencing them in much the same way that the Greeks and Romans impact us today. However, because they come from so long ago, these ancient civilizations have many mysteries that continue to engage our imaginations. We might not know everything about them, but the little we have showcases rich, vibrant cultures, full of people who face the same struggles and victories we experience as well. It's no secret why people are still fascinated by these ancient cultures. Here are 5 mysteries from 5 different ancient Mediterranean civilizations. Number 1. Historians are not sure if Queen Dido was a real person. Carthage was one of the great Mediterranean civilizations. The Carthaginians built a vast empire based on trade that threatened the Roman Empire. Rome was so intimidated by the Carthaginian Empire that it waged 3 separate wars with Carthage to establish its dominance over the Western Mediterranean. However, long before the Punic Wars shook Carthage to its core, the people developed a vibrant culture. Sadly, even though they were unique, their culture is one of the mysteries that historians are still trying to uncover. One of Carthage's chief mysteries, though, concerns its founder. Almost all of the Carthaginian history comes to us today through the Greeks and Romans, which raises some issues because both civilizations were enemies with Carthage at some point in history. Also, Carthage began so long ago that its founding has passed into legend. According to the stories, Elishat was the sister of King Pygmalion, leader of Tyre. He wronged her deeply, although the stories differ about precisely what he did. Some accounts state that Pygmalion murdered Elishat's husband to prevent her from sharing the throne. Whatever happened, Elishat was distraught and fled Tyre, sailing west with some followers. She landed in Cyprus and gathered more devotees by saving 80 women from religious prostitution. Elisha even collected a priest of Baal as part of her entourage. By the time she arrived in Africa, Elisha had a large group with her, and both the Berbers and the people of Utica welcomed her. However, they were unwilling to give Elisha the land she wanted for free. The king only allowed her the ground a single ox hide could cover. At first, it didn't seem like much, but Elisha cut the ox hide into strips and used them to encircle a hill that became the citadel of Carthage. Elisha was so beloved by the Carthaginians that she was called Queen Dido, which means beloved in their language. Queen Dido's story has several mythical elements, which is precisely why historians are unsure if it actually happened. Archaeological efforts to discover more are complicated because people still live in the area. However, historians have determined that Carthage was founded around the same time that Dido's story has her living in North Africa. It's highly unusual for origin stories like this to feature a woman, especially in ancient times. Because the myth does not tie her to divinity or a heroic bloodline, many historians believe that Queen Dido was probably a real person, even if she has been obscured by time. Number 2. The Minotaur myth possibly has a basis in the Minoan practice of bull leaping. Almost everyone has heard of the Minotaur, a monster from ancient Greek mythology that lived on Crete. Still, few people know about the Minoan people, who lived on islands across the Aegean Sea. These people lived about 5,000 years ago, from around 2700 to 1100 BCE, which makes it difficult for historians to learn much about these people. Thankfully, they did leave a few artifacts behind, including the palace complex at Knossos and pieces of artwork. The Minoans were successful because they were among the first people to figure out how to make bronze, which they traded with other civilizations for wealth and power. They created art with their wealth, and some of the most impactful pieces for historians have been their frescoes, paintings applied directly on a wall or ceiling. It might sound wasteful or unsustainable because they are fragile. Still, they are one of the oldest ways to make art. In these frescoes, historians have learned about critical aspects of Minoan culture. One scene that often appears is young men and women leaping over bulls. The image appears in other Minoan art, like jewelry or pottery, so we know it was important to them. Historians believe bull leaping was a ritual, although it was not usually religious. The athlete grabbed the horns of a charging bull and leaped over it, landing safely on its back. The ritual was something that people could win because winners are celebrated in Minoan artwork. Athletes could be men and women. Some experts believed the practice was connected to the sacred bull, which was associated with the supreme deity in ancient religions. However, other scholars maintain that the artwork is inconclusive and that the Minoans may not have participated in bull leaping at all. This tradition is plastered across the Minoan civilization, but it is another great mystery that we may never fully solve. However, some historians wonder if the bull leaping eventually led to the Greek myth of the Minotaur. This half-man, half-bull has excited imaginations for thousands of years. But the events that may have inspired this story are forever clouded by myth and time. Number 3. Most of what we know about the Phoenicians comes from other civilizations. The Phoenicians were an ancient Mediterranean civilization built on trade, meaning they appeared in documents left behind by other societies. They never made a territorial empire like the Romans, but the Phoenicians still impacted much of the Mediterranean. For some contemporaries, this was praiseworthy. Others saw them as despicable and greedy. The differences in perception were based on trade agreements, which means we cannot take them as objective factual statements. However, these secondary sources are almost all of the written documents we still have today concerning the Phoenicians, leaving historians with the task of reconstructing their history without all the pieces. Reconstructing Phoenician early history is especially difficult because the Phoenicians did not use clay tablets that much. By the time they stepped into history, the clay tablet was antiquated. Papyrus was the new technology, and the Phoenicians used it for practically all of their record-keeping. Although paper is much lighter than clay tablets, it is also more susceptible to destruction via water, fire, or even the sun and air. Thus, very few Phoenician records are left today. So much of their history and culture is a mystery. Historians use the objects they left behind or buried in graves to learn about their society. But even this causes issues because people did not tend to save mundane things. This hides a section of Phoenician culture that will most likely always be a mystery, because those everyday items are long gone. Another reason we have so little information about their early history is that the Phoenicians started their civilization just in time for the Late Bronze Age collapse. Cultures around the Mediterranean fell, leaving civil unrest, massive population shifts, and few written records. They were able to get good land and construct a trade network strong enough to sustain them for about 1,000 years. Soon, the Phoenicians were strong enough to establish other city-states along the coast, including cities like Tyre and Byblos. The Phoenicians were a unique civilization because they appeared to have focused more on trade than global conquest, but they left little behind to tell us of their adventures. They are one of the many mysteries surrounding the ancient Mediterranean. Although we can trace their impact through history, we are still trying to discover who they really were. Number 4. It has yet to be determined why the Mycenaean civilization collapsed. Historians know the Mycenaeans were an ancient Mediterranean civilization that lived in Greece from around 1600 BCE to 1100 BCE. They even believed the Mycenaeans fought in the Trojan War, although the war probably didn't include supernatural forces. These people were strong. However, the Late Bronze Age collapse took the Mycenaean civilization down alongside many others. Of course, the Mycenaeans did not collapse overnight. Some outside attacks around 1250 BCE destroyed several cities, such as Thebes and Mycenae, but historians do not know who caused them. The incursions continued for about 10 years, but a decline soon followed in trade, increasing civil unrest across the Mediterranean. The final disaster came in 1190 BCE, but again, historians do not know what exactly happened. Mycenae was attacked and destroyed, but a large portion of the population was killed this time. Other areas around Greece experienced similar fates, scattering the survivors. However, some places like Athens survived untouched. At first, these events may not seem like a mystery. Another civilization must have conquered the Mycenaeans. Even if we accept that theory, there are still questions about who the victors were. The Dorians have been a popular choice for many years. They were a rival group of Greek people who moved south and destroyed everything in their path. It would account for the massive destruction, new burial practices, and new types of pottery that appeared during this time. Other historians think the Dorian people might not have been involved. Instead, the attacks could have come from the Sea Peoples, a Mediterranean civilization so mysterious that historians are not sure who they were. The Sea Peoples attacked many societies along the eastern shore of the Mediterranean, but even though they left their mark on history, they are still shrouded in mystery. Still, other historians think that the Mycenaeans were too strong to fall to a surprise attack from outside forces. Instead, there may have been internal strife and weakening political systems that caused a civil war. This would have caused destruction and allowed other people groups to take over the land quickly. Some of this internal strife may have been caused by natural disasters like earthquakes or droughts. There are many options for what could have happened to the Mycenaeans, but their end is still a mystery to us. However, they were an essential civilization that laid the foundation for one of the most impactful ancient cultures, the classical Greeks. Number 5. The Romans were not the first ancient Mediterranean culture in Italy. The Etruscans are one of the best-kept secrets of the ancient Mediterranean. This is partially because the Roman Empire absorbed them in the 3rd century BCE. At first, that may seem to make the Etruscans less exciting or mysterious. But the Etruscans built a complex society that we only have fragments of today. Almost everything we know about the Etruscans comes from their unique burial rituals, a combination of other traditions around them. Etruscan tombs were built with stone or cut into rock faces, and they were usually large enough for the person to be entombed with belongings such as furniture and other items they might need in the afterlife. They tended to resemble houses, complete with gabled roofs, windows, and door frames. The walls even had paintings on them, and people were laid to rest on a stone bench with a headrest. The wealthy were entombed in sarcophagi that looked like the people had appeared in the prime of their lives. Historians have learned about the Etruscan culture by examining everything that remains in Etruscan tombs, but objects alone do not tell the whole story. There is still much we do not know about these people. Even though the Etruscans had a writing system, most of the written sources we have today come from other civilizations, like the Romans. For a while, the two groups coexisted, and once the Romans conquered the Etruscans, the people joined the Roman Empire and ended up influencing it dramatically. Rome would have been very different without the Etruscans. They learned about drainage systems, monarchies, and the forum from this ancient group. The problem with Rome taking over aspects of Etruscan culture is that historians now struggle to separate what was original to Etruscan society. By the 3rd century BCE, the Etruscans had lost independence and become part of Rome, although it took some time before they lost many aspects that made them unique, like their flamboyant clothing and burial practices. The Etruscans will always be mysterious because so much of what we know about them centers around their connection to the Romans. Despite that, the Etruscans are worth pursuing, even if they are half-shrouded in time, because their culture still influences our lives today, even if we can't fully see it. How would you like to get a deeper understanding of history, impress your friends, and predict the future more accurately based on past events? If this sounds like something you might be into, then check out the brand new Captivating History Book Club by clicking the first link in the description. To learn more about ancient Mediterranean civilizations, check out our book, Ancient Mediterranean Civilizations, a captivating guide to Carthage, the Minoans, Phoenicians, Mycenaeans, and Etruscans. It's available as an ebook, paperback, and audiobook. Also, grab your free Mythology Bundle ebook while it's still available. All links are in the description. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and subscribe for more videos like this.